Hi everyone, I'm here with Rebecca Hull. So Rebecca, thank you for accepting my request for an interview.
Thanks for having me.
So you're a student counsellor, freelance writer, travel blogger, dividing your time between the UK and Greece, co-author of Rough Guides, and most importantly, you're the author of the novel Girl Gone Greek, which we're hoping will be turned into a film. And as I told you, I can see it becoming a very successful film. So let's hope for that. We'll get back to that in a moment. Now, the Greek people who follow me on Facebook might already be familiar with you because I made a video in which I talked about an article that you wrote recently for the English newspaper The Telegraph, in which you were basically praising Greece for the way in which it's dealing with the current situation. And this article got an incredibly positive response in Greece. Lots of people shared it. It was mentioned in many Greek newspapers. So it seems that Greek people were, really happy that something so positive was being said about Greece in a foreign newspaper. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, what do you think of the way in which Greece has been portrayed in the media in recent years?
Well, thanks for having me on board, first of all. Thanks very much, Frederick. I would say, well, just to backtrack a little bit to that article, since then, there have been some extra very positive articles in the press, such as The Guardian, The Independent, particularly Bloomberg and Al Jazeera have done some very positive articles about, as we've gone on, about Greece's handling of the pandemic and, what's happened. But, I mean, Greece in recent years, it's since probably 2008, since the economic crisis, I would say Greece, and I used this phrase actually in the opinion article that I wrote for the Telegraph, that I see it as being viewed as the bad man of Europe, like the bogeyman of Europe, and that was never my experience of Greece. I felt that Greece was always getting the bad end, was always being scapegoated. So I didn't like what I was reading about Greece in the international press. In general, overall, I would say, to generalise, it just was not very positive. Nothing is ever black and white. Nothing is ever, well, it's their fault, it's your fault, it's this person's fault, or it's that country's fault. The shade of grey area was never looked at. It was always too busy finger pointing. So I was trying to go beyond the finger pointing and thinking, look, maybe there's a bigger thing here, rather than just pointing the finger at the Greeks. Let's look at some of the positive about Greece.
I understand. So now you are in Greece at the moment, are you?
I am at the moment,
Right.
yes.
So how exactly would you describe your connection to Greece?
Well, I started off coming over to teach English, and that was way back in 2008. And then I was initially only going to stay a year in the tiny Greek village that I was in, and then maybe go abroad somewhere else to teach English. But I really liked the Greek way of life. I just found it very simple, and that I found really suited me. It was a little bit chaotic, but I liked it. Not chaotic in a negative way, if that makes sense. I found it suited my personality. It doesn't suit everybody, obviously. So I thought I would go to Athens for the following year and teach English, which I did, and then it just kind of went on from there. I just liked, the more I stayed in Greece, the more I liked the country. If a Greek doesn't like you, they're not going to pretend to like you. There's not going to be this fakeness about Greeks. And there's no holding, or in my experience again, there's no holding this grudge. Look, this is what it is. This is how I feel. And that's it. And then maybe the next minute or the next days, things will be over, which is complete opposite experience of what I've had in the UK. I find when I go back home, I need to really rein myself in. I can't tell people, Not necessarily my family, because they're used to me, but if I'm going out for a coffee with a friend, or if I'm speaking to a friend, I can't be as honest to them. There's a level of speaking to people in the UK. There is so much vocabulary that needs to be used in the UK for politeness. When you're talking to people, there is so much diplomacy and so much, you need to say this, you need to say that, you need to be using these words, and it's just exhausting.
Right, so as I mentioned before, you're the author of Girl Gone Greek. Now, for the people who haven't read your book, what is it about and what prompted you to write this book?
Well, I'll try not to spoil it too much. It's loosely based on my experience in the first year living in the village when I taught English. I don't mention the name of the village. I call it travel memoir stroke fiction because it is based loosely on my experience, hence memoir, but also fiction because I've been able to embellish it somewhat, which is fun, which is nice. And it's about this character who is at a certain age in her life and she's not really fitting into the everyday stereotypes of what someone of her age is supposed to be doing. So she decides, okay, well, look, I'm going to go away. I'm going to teach English abroad. I want to integrate into a culture. So I'm going to sit and then I'm going to come back. But she finds she doesn't want to come back because she falls in love with a culture. It's not your typical girl goes away, goes to a foreign country, meets a man and falls in love. I never wanted it to be like that. So if you're expecting a love story, expect a love story of a different kind. It's a love story of a culture. And the reason why I started writing it, I think that was in your question as well, was because I wanted to portray a different side of Greece that basically was not being portrayed in the press. As I said, at the time, the press, I felt, was giving very negative views of Greece. And I thought, you know what, I'm not a political writer. I can't write politically and I don't even want to. But maybe I could reach a wider audience by writing a novel, a travel memoir, because I think more people would read something like that. So I tried it. Hence the birth of Girl Gone Greek. And also at the same time I started my travel blog, Life Beyond Borders.
Now, I have to say, I really loved your book. I mean, I told you before in our email exchanges, I really think that everything was in it, in the sense that I could really relate to it. It really reminded me of, some of the things I had observed myself when I went to Greece. And what I love about it is, you really go from a fairly, stereotypical vision of Greece at the beginning, with your main character, because of course at the beginning she doesn't really know much about the country. And progressively, she really gets to learn more and more about Greece, and you can really see the whole process of her learning more and more. And we really go from that stereotypical vision of Greece that everyone, has heard of, the sun, beaches, people being relaxed, etc., to something more and more accurate. And then she gets to, learn about the multifaceted nature of the Greek culture. And I was also surprised to discover that there are quite a few things about Greek history. Quite a few things about the kinds of things that people don't necessarily hear about outside of Greece, like for example the 28th of October, those kinds of things, and so not just ancient Greek history but also modern Greek history, which is not very well known, and I found that really great. So I think, but besides being a very pleasant book to read, and as far as I'm concerned a real page turner, I think it's also a great short introduction to Greek culture. Now, I'd like to ask you a few more, specific questions about some passages of the book that I found interesting. So here's one, for example, from chapter 2. So Rachel, your main character, is in a hotel in Piraeus, and she says, so, leaning over my balcony, I saw two men shouting, waving and gesticulating at each other. They looked ready to break into a fight any minute. Yet suddenly they broke out into raucous laughter and clapped one another on the back. So Rachel seems to be quite surprised by that behaviour, and then she mentions those two men again later in the book. What exactly do they represent?
I think again that comes back to maybe what I would say forgive me if any Greeks are listening to this and they feel that it's insulting. To me, it feels, to me as a British person, a typical Greek trait. The British are very quiet by nature. They are very reserved. I think that's probably the word. They are very, very, I want to say, not cold, maybe cold's the wrong word, but they are very, very internal, okay? So this was Rachel, the character's first night in the country, or the morning after the first night, and she sees these two people, and she assumes, but within her British nature, that these two people, because they're talking at an elevated level to her ears, that this is shouting and that this is arguing, because these people are, and particularly British people, do not gesticulate towards each other, not nearly as much as they would in southern Mediterranean cultures. Okay, that's a cultural thing, definitely, that I have picked up and that I tried to put through in the novel, that Rachel picked up too. And that's why Rachel was quite taken aback when the next minute these two people just were clearly not about to punch each other's lights out. They were actually maybe just talking at normal level. And that was really what quite surprised her.
Now, in chapter 6, so it says, I was increasingly enjoying evenings in Greece as I realised that people had a much more civilised approach to a night out. No one seemed to give a damn that I didn't want an alcoholic drink. There was no pressure. So now that's interesting, because it's not something I had noticed when I was in Greece. So do you feel that there's a difference between British and Greek drinking culture?
Definitely. Well, when I first came, I don't know, to be fair on the British culture, I don't know how much this has changed now, because I come and go quite a bit and I haven't been in the UK for a while now. But yes, I mean, look, to go by my experiences, and to even TV dramas that I see about the UK, or even TV documentaries that I see about the UK, conversation revolves around alcohol in the UK. Even people in their 30s and 40s, their life seems to be Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They go into work on a Wednesday. They're planning on what they're going to do on a Friday, and the conversation revolves around, okay, well, let's go out after work and get plastered meaning let's go out and get drunk. I could never fit into that culture ever, even when I was a teenager in the UK, because I just never understood the desire to want to do that. Hence, I was always looked upon as being different in the UK, and I was always looked upon as being snobbish. Hence, probably why I fit the Greek culture more, because I can go out for an evening in Greece and have a cup of coffee if I want, or a tonic water, and no one's going to look at me and tease me for wanting to drink a tonic water. So yes, there is definitely an alcohol culture in the UK, and I think even if you ever had a chance to speak to paramedics or police, I think you would find that they would say the same thing.
Right, I understand. Another passage I found really interesting is that the whole part where you talk about the Ochi Day parade, so the 28th of October, so for those who don't know, celebrating the Greek government's answer to Mussolini's ultimatum, so about to invade Greece, and they refused to collaborate with him. So that's what they're celebrating on that day. And so you talked quite a bit about that parade. What was your experience? What was it like seeing that for the first time for you? Not necessarily for the character Rachel, but also for you.
I think the thing that comes to mind is the Greek national pride, in a good way, because I feel that we don't have this pride mentality in the UK. Maybe because we weren't invaded like that. The pride is encouraged in Greece to celebrate. I don't know if it's necessarily encouraged to celebrate in the UK. Maybe, I don't know. But there was a good feeling of pride, a positive feeling of pride. You know, people waving their flags, people just feeling very, very happy.
So this Orchidee parade thing, etc., all of those, actually, I think most of the history bits in the book have to do with when you go out of the village and visit, for example, Athens and also other places. I'm not necessarily going to mention everything, wouldn't want to spoil the book too much. Now, do you think that there was a huge difference between, the village in which you were living and Athens?
Athens feels like a big village, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
There's Athens is pockets of neighbourhoods. There are pockets of neighbourhoods in Athens that really people just come together. And I have never really experienced this in a capital city. Certainly not London, certainly not Manchester or Birmingham. My next door neighbour, from day one when I was here in this apartment in Athens, she was bringing me food. And that has never happened in a capital city. Where in the UK, and it was in my experience in the village, I never used to necessarily get food, but there were people that would at least talk to me in the village. But I've been very lucky with my next door neighbour here. I mean, sometimes the food would last for 3 or 4 days, because a Greek's version of giving you food is to really mount it up. So that's what I mean about a village mentality.
Now, can you talk to me about the process of turning this book into a film? How far are you down that road? How?
Oh, well, that's going to be... unless something miraculously happens, and I'm not being negative, I'm having to be realistic. Listen, so in 2017... It took about a year, so by November 2017, the script was written after 3 drafts. I know of somebody who is a screenwriter, and I just flipped the idea to him. I said, look, the book's done in 2015. Do you think this could possibly be written into a script? Thinking he'd say, oh no, look, it's no good. But he said, well, look, anything's possible. Let's work it between the two of us, because I'm certainly no screenwriter. And I think it's very important to highlight here, if you have a film that is based on a book, when you go and see a film based on a book at any cinema, and you come out thinking the book was much better, okay, it's because a book can never be adapted to a screen exactly. So after about 2 or 3 drafts, the scriptwriter and I thought, okay, we're happy with this now. And then I started entering it into film awards. He showed me how to, and it won a couple. The main one it won was in 2018, the London Greek Film Festival, Best Feature Fiction Script. So I was very proud of that, so that it's got that behind it. We now need to try and find a production team who think, okay, this is interesting, this is an interesting concept, yes, we want to take this on board, let's get something done. A friend of mine helped me create a website for gorgongreek.com, and I put a little bit more about the characters on there, just so that there is a website there in case anyone is interested in looking more deeply into the film. But everything is a learning curve. It needs funding, it needs someone to take an interest, it needs a production team.
Right. Well, I really hope it's going to happen. And I guess the people, whoever is watching this, can probably help if you share the video, if you like the video, that might help. You mentioned, of course that's ambitious, but why not? You mentioned, you could imagine Bill Nye as the Rachel's father. I remember I read that on the website. And I thought, this is so true. I could really imagine him, playing that role, in the film version of the book. Anyway, I really hope it's going to happen.
Can I interrupt you? Do you remember who I said I could see playing Rachel?
Yes, I believe that was Jodie Comer.
Yes, I've completely fallen in love with her after seeing... forget Killing Eve. Obviously Killing Eve is superb, but I've seen her in... programs before, and I just think the two of them, there is, and I'm gonna give you a spoiler now, that airport scene where Rachel's father says goodbye to her at Gatwick. I can just picture Bill Nye kissing Jodie Comer's forehead and waving her goodbye. Oh my God, I mean, literally, I can picture it.
That's true. I agree. So yes, I really hope it's going to happen. Maybe one last question before we finish. So since you're also, I mean, besides writing that book, you've also written, co-authored rough guides. So for the people who might have never gone to Greece, for example, who are watching this video, do you have a favorite spot or any recommendations for whoever would like to visit Greece?
I think don't avoid the mainland. So many people think Greece and think the islands, and there are hundreds of islands. They are beautiful, no doubt about it. I mean, islands such as Paxos, which is in the Ionian chain, which is tiny. It's really tiny, and it's not very well known. Try not to go to the big Kos roads, etc., which I'm not disputing that they're not nice, but there are so many lovely tiny islands. Simi, which if you fly to Rhodes, you can get a ferry to Simi. It's beautiful, Venetian houses tumbling down from the top into the sea almost. But on the mainland, you've got Parga on the mainland, which is up actually opposite the Ionian Islands on the west coast. You've also got the Peloponnese. There's some beautiful parts of the Peloponnese. These are these three fingers that point out from Greece, which is, so you have Athens here and then the Peloponnese here. Wine routes, they've got wonderful wine routes where you can sample wines. They've got farms that produce honey. There's also a bear and wolf sanctuary up towards Macedonia that rehabilitates wild bears and wolves. I mean, not many people know about that, in a village called Nymphaeum, not far from Meteora, where the big monasteries are on top of the big rocks, which was used in one of the James Bond films years ago. I can't remember now the name of the film, but so there are some lovely places in the mainland too. It's such an undiscovered country and culture.
Okay, well, I really hope that if you've never been to Greece, that this video has made you, given you the motivation to actually go there and visit. And also, I mean, as I said, before, what I loved about your book is, usually we talk a lot about ancient Greece. I mean, that's usually whenever, we say Greece, people often think about ancient Greece, ancient Greek history, etc. But there's also lots of, modern Greek history is incredibly interesting as well. Right, so thank you very much for accepting my request for an interview again. It was lovely to talk with you.
Thanks for having me.